Welcome to Staying Connected, a podcast where I talk to other people about their stories with VEDS or vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Staying Connected. This is your host, Katie, and before we get into the show, I want to remind you that the views, information, and opinions in these podcasts are those of the individuals involved and do not represent the opinions of the Marfan Foundation. The Marfan Foundation is not responsible for and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in them, nor does the information constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This show is not produced by or affiliated with the Marfan Foundation or the VEDS Movement. In our last episode, we talked to Tyler Farley, who was diagnosed with VEDS at 17 years old following a bowel perforation. In today's episode, we're going to talk to Kelly Gann, who was diagnosed with VEDS in 2009 when she was in physician assistant or physician associate school. Kelly shares how she coped with that diagnosis, how her life has changed since then, and how her experience has changed now that her sister Cristy has also been diagnosed. Before we go over to the interview, if you want to support this show, consider joining my Patreon. For a few dollars a month, you can make sure this show continues to reach people around the world with real-life stories about VEDS. You can join the Patreon at patreon.com/translucent1, and you can also support the show by sharing this podcast with people you know to help us raise awareness of VEDS around the world together. Thank you so much for your support, and a huge thanks to my current patrons who have already been supporting the show. My top tier patrons are listed in the episode show notes. Okay, let's go to the interview. Hey Kelly, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast to share your story with everybody with VEDS. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So my name is Kelly Gann. I'm 41 and I live in Des Moines, Iowa, but I'm originally from Denver, Colorado.
And when were you diagnosed with VEDS?
I was diagnosed in 2009.
Like, how did that come about?
So the summer of 2009, I developed some groin pain, and I had sort of chalked it up to doing some running that I hadn't previously done before. So it was a new activity. So I thought, oh gosh, it's just probably some muscle pain. And I kind of ignored it. And then it just didn't really get any better. And a couple of weeks later, I developed a really, really, really bad headache, like the worst headache I'd ever had. So I went to an urgent care and I found out that my blood pressure was 180 over 140. So they sent me to the emergency room, and that's sort of where all of this began. That's where the workup began. So, they scanned my head, they scanned my chest, they did EKGs, they did a lumbar puncture, trying to figure out why my blood pressure was so high. And everything was normal. And it was while we were in the ER, my poor husband said to one of the doctors, she's been having this growing pain. And all of us immediately were like, oh, no, honey, it's, nobody's worried about the growing pain. Don't worry about it. But turns out I had dissections in my iliac arteries.
In both of them?
In both of them, yeah. And so we didn't find that out for a couple more weeks. What ended up happening is I one day lost feeling in my toes. And when I tried to walk, I couldn't walk more than a couple of steps without intense pain in my calves. And a couple of days prior to that, we had actually gotten a CT angiogram of my pelvis and abdomen. And so I got the results after the pain and the numbness had started, and that's what showed the dissections.
So then you had like a flap there that was blocking.
Yeah, they said that the dissection, the tear had caused a flap inside, and that blocked off blood flow to my feet. And so I didn't even have pulses in the tops of my feet.
So they didn't know still at this time that you had VEDS?
No, absolutely no idea. My dad had died at 40 from what we thought was a heart attack. Mm-hmm. But just being so young, that did sort of pique my own primary care doctor's interest. And so she kind of recommended, like, let's go down this avenue of like, is this autoimmune? Is this a genetic thing since your dad died so young? So she was pretty awesome about just kind of fighting for a diagnosis for me. I was pretty lucky.
Yeah, that is really great to have a PCP that's really interested in finding you an answer.
Yeah. She told me at one point, I know there's something going on. You're not crazy, because I'm sure a lot of people with VEDS, in their diagnosis stage or their pre-diagnosis stage can kind of relate. You start to feel like, what the heck is going on? Am I crazy? Am I imagining this?
Yeah. So in this year, you had already had the bilateral iliac dissections that you didn't know about.
Yep.
So like this groin pain,
Yep.
and then the severe headache and a really high blood pressure episode, and like no real answers to any of this. Now, what did they do for your dissections?
Yeah. And I hadn't had anything prior to this. So I went to a vascular surgeon for consult, to decide, is this something surgical? Are we going to put a graft in there? Are we going to coil it? But because we really didn't know the reason, they decided to treat me with Coumadin blood thinners, which I was.
How did that go?
Well, it went, luckily, I was really lucky. It went fine. Number one, I'm clumsy. Number two, they don't really do that with dissections anymore because you're at such a high risk for a rupture. And if you're on blood thinners and you start bleeding, that just complicates things. So I've since been told that's probably not something we'll ever do again. So
yeah, but it restored the blood flow to your legs.
It did. So eventually it took a few months before my blood flow was not quite back to normal, but to where, it wasn't causing me any problems.
Yeah. Now let me go back to, so you said the PCP, really told you like, you're not crazy. There's something going on here. Had you been made to feel crazy?
A little bit. Yeah. In that, in August of 2009, August and September, I was probably in the emergency room 3 or 4 times just because of all the, new symptoms I was having. And a lot of the time it was because my PCP recommended I go. At one point they thought maybe I had a clot, and I kept going to the same ER and I kept seeing the same attending. And at one point he was just basically like, I don't know what's going on with you, but I can tell you it's not emergent. And, you probably just have some sort of autoimmune disorder and you really just need to follow up with your PCP and stop coming here, essentially. So
the one who told you to go to the ER.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happened next? So she was.
So then, so she decided that maybe we needed to consult with rheumatology because some of my labs had showed some markers of inflammation, and some of my like autoimmune labs were abnormal. So she wasn't sure. Again, is this genetic? Is this autoimmune? So she wanted to consult.
Yeah.
So I went and saw this rheumatologist in Denver, and he was basically like, I don't know why you're here. I don't know what your doctor wants me to do. I don't think you have any genetic disorders. I certainly don't think you have, vascular EDS, because that was one of the things she was posing as a reason, as a theory. He said, I don't think you have vascular EDS. You don't have any autoimmune disorders, but I'll go ahead and send this genetic test. So I sent it out and it came back, a few weeks later. And I found out, so I was in PA school at the time when all this is happening. And I found out it was a Friday afternoon. I was in class, so I couldn't answer my phone. And so after class ended, I saw there was a voicemail. They had left me a voicemail telling me I had vascular EDS. And it was, Friday after 5, so I couldn't even talk to anybody about it.
Yeah.
It's a lovely way.
Yeah, seriously. That's a lot to just kind of process.
Yeah.
As over, like, by yourself.
Yeah. And I remember was thinking about this. It was one of the nurses that called, and it's not their fault. They're kind of told what to do a lot of the time. But I remember she left the message and she said, the doctor just wanted to tell me to let you know that you did test positive for, is it vascular error? And so she just kind of botched the whole name, but I knew.
Yeah.
Poor thing. But
now, had you looked into, so your PCP kind of was just like maybe vascular EDS. Yeah. Had you looked into it before you got this voicemail?
Especially just knowing my dad's history, and you're in PA school, so you're going through all these medical classes and you have access to all these, medical books and databases. And so you run down the rabbit hole for sure. Even when you don't have anything, I think it's really common for medical school students and nursing students, PA students, whatever, to sort of, run down those rabbit holes. And I did. I thought at one point I had like Takayasu's vasculitis. I diagnosed myself with everything. And one of them was VEDS. And I knew how especially back in 2009, I thought that was probably the worst thing that could happen. And so I tried not to think about it too much, but it was definitely on my own differential.
Yeah, that you had done for yourself. So how did you process that information? Like, what was that next, like you're in PA school, you've had all these medical events, you find out you have vascular EDS. Like, how did all of this play out for you?
It was really tough. I felt pretty lonely. I had a really awesome supportive PA class, and the university was really awesome. They actually started recording classes for me, which has since been implemented as like just a basic thing. But they did that for me because I was missing so much class, and I was so determined to keep going and to finish. And there was definitely a couple of moments where I had to like think really hard about whether or not it was possible for me to continue, and not just physically, but emotionally, I was kind of a mess. So my husband was super supportive, but it's like, we went and saw a geneticist, and it's like, they tell you there's not really anything you can do other, like, don't get pregnant. You probably shouldn't get pregnant. Think like weird things like don't go scuba diving. I used to hike a ton, and they said no more backcountry hiking, be careful with yoga, all that.
Yeah.
So it just felt like a lot had been taken away from me, and it was tough to get through.
And I know I could do the math, but how old were you in 2009? When you
28, 29.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a weird age to get a diagnosis. Like, that's when I got mine at 28. I just turned 28. And it just like you, I had been athletic for a good majority of my life. And it just felt like it explained everything, but it also took so much away from me.
Yeah.
At that time, and it was just a huge life changer at a very strange age to have to try to adjust to that. So how did you adjust to that?
I mean, honestly, in the beginning, not very well. I sort of just buried myself in school, and I kind of, you and I have kind of talked about this a little bit, but initially I tried to find some support groups and, just people to talk to, but there was just not really anything out there. And so I just studied a lot. I just studied and I studied and I studied. And when I wasn't studying, I would read. And I used to read, like, even in PA school, a book a week. Like, I would just, I just kind of buried myself in it. And then that led to me graduating from PA school and then getting my first job. And I just kept so busy that, it wasn't until my second vascular incident that I really started to, try and take care of myself and sort of process some of this.
Yeah. When was your second vascular event?
It was last February 2021. And I had an aortic dissection, abdominal aortic dissection, left renal artery dissection, and a renal infarct.
So what were the symptoms of that for you?
Yeah, I woke up and I just felt really, really sick to my stomach, which had kind of happened with my iliac dissections. And so I just remember that morning, I was like, oh, this feels familiar. And I just knew. I knew something was going on. I had really bad flank pain. I felt super nauseous, felt like I had to throw up. And then that flank pain kind of developed into chest pain, and it took me down to the ground. I couldn't get up. And so I yelled for my husband, and we actually called an ambulance. Because I thought, this is it.
Yeah.
I had that moment. And so took me to the ER. They did scans. They found a renal artery dissection. They consulted with a vascular surgeon here in Des Moines, and he said, that's not why she's having pain. So they sent me home. And then I went 2 more times that week to the ER, and it wasn't until the third visit to the ER that they saw that the renal artery dissection had progressed into had kind of run into the aorta and had caused an aortic dissection. And then I was in the ICU.
And how long were you in the ICU?
I was there for 4 days. I was in the hospital, I think 5 days total, but the first 4 were in the ICU. Mm-hmm. And that was interesting. The reason I was in the ICU for so long was because the vascular surgeon wouldn't come down he wouldn't physically come down to consult. They had to like we had to write a report about it. It was crazy.
Wait, tell me more about this.
So I had been in the ICU for like 24 hours and I hadn't eaten anything and I hadn't, drank. They wouldn't even let me drink water because they were like, well, I don't know if this is surgical or what. But the vascular surgeon wouldn't give them any orders, and he wouldn't come down and like lay hands on me and see me until, so my husband, he's seriously saved my life a million times, I swear. He went out to the charge nurse's desk and was like, what the heck is going on? Like, we need some answers. She's sitting in here. We haven't talked to any doctors. Like, what's going on? And so the charge nurse had no idea. And she's like, oh my God. And so it got elevated up to like hospital administration.
Wow.
And yeah. And they basically were like, they told the surgeon, like, you need to come down here. Like, you admitted that she was admitted under your name. You have to give orders. Like, you have to tell us what to do. And so he finally came down, and basically he said, you're not surgical. Like, we wouldn't do surgery on you here in Des Moines anyways. And like, I really don't feel comfortable with your case. And, I'll take care of you here while you're in the hospital. But
yeah. Did you have follow-up somewhere else at a different major center or?
So I followed up with him, and then he told me again that he just was really uncomfortable. And, on the one hand, I'm happy that he let me know that, because I don't want to waste my time. So I tried to go to Mayo. Insurance wouldn't cover it. And so now I'm at University of Iowa Hospital System,
okay,
which is 2 hours away from my home. So I don't really know how helpful it is.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point to bring up as well, because I have I guess I would call it a belief system at this point that like it's really important to have a local team for emergencies, but also have that expert care center.
Yeah.
That, so like I lived in Florida and I had a doctor like 2 hours away that, ideally like I wouldn't have an emergency and I wouldn't have to go there. Right. But I could be helicoptered there. But the major concern that I had is that I didn't have any local emergency care team or anybody to advocate for me in an emergency. So I think that those two pieces are really important.
I think they're extremely important. And I wish, so I've lived in Des Moines for 7 years. When I lived in Denver, I felt much more comfortable with my care team, but I took it for granted. I thought, and especially being a PA student, I thought, the doctors are going to be great wherever you go. You're whatever, people are going to take care of you. And we moved to Des Moines, and there's nothing wrong with Des Moines or its hospital systems. I just don't think that it's as robust in terms of providing the kind of specialty care that some folks might need, like some folks with VEDS.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the only vascular team here in Des Moines doesn't want to touch me.
Yeah.
So the next closest vascular team is 2 hours away. So it's like in the event of an emergency, I'd have to be, helicoptered somewhere or, and so I kind of wish when my husband and I were, deciding to make the move to the Midwest that we'd sort of thought about that.
Yeah.
And I would encourage anybody, with VEDS that's moving, just to think about that. Like really, that should be one of your, that should be one of the things that should take precedence over other things. So just making sure there's somebody to take care of you in the event of an emergency.
Even if I used to do a lot of calling ahead before I moved back to Florida, trying to get my care team set up. I mean, it is a hassle and it is exhausting.
It is such a pain. And to switch them, oh gosh, I I'm sure you do too, but I have like a notebook with all my crap in it. So,
So I want to go back actually to your features of VEDS because we didn't really cover those when you were first getting diagnosed. Yeah. I know that the diagnosis itself kind of made sense because of your dad's history, but did you see any of those features in yourself as well?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I had the worst bruising growing up. I mean, and I've heard other VEDS folks say this, but that they thought my parents abused me because I had so many bruises. And I did. I had so many bruises. And I'm also very, very, your blog is the translucent one, I know. And I have very translucent skin. Like you can see my veins. And I just feel like that makes the bruises show up even more than maybe they would on somebody that's a little bit darker skinned. But I used to get teased for my bruises, which is the most ridiculous thing. So I remember bruises. I also, I always thought it was because I was clumsy. Like people used to call me clumsy, but I think I just have really loose joints. Like I just got done breaking my foot for like the second time. So my ligaments in my ankles are loose. I'm double jointed in my knees. I'm double jointed in my elbows. Most recently, in the last couple of years, I started getting skin tears. Like I always tell people, I have old lady skin, even though I'm only 41. I'm not an old lady,
No.
but my skin tears like it does. What else? The thin upper lip. I feel like I have that.
Mm-hmm.
The lobeless ears. Those are all those minor things.
Yeah. But all those minor things together really paint a picture.
Yeah. That's the kind of thinner nose, and
Mm-hmm.
and I look similar. My sister and I both have real similar features to my father's, so it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So let's talk about your sister. So she's being interviewed in the same season.
Yep, Cristy.
Yep. And she was diagnosed
Recently.
very recently. So I don't want to go too far into like her story because she's sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
But how did that, like, how does it feel for you? Like, 'cause it seems like for a while, you were diagnosed in 2009 and you didn't really have a lot of resources available, and you just kind of buried yourself in your work and your studies and doing things that you'd enjoy. And then your sister's diagnosed like years later. Like, how is that for you?
I mean, a bummer. I was really bummed out about it for her, that you don't want to join the club. You don't want anybody else to join the club. But and I feel guilty about this, but on the other hand, it made me feel like I wasn't so alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's hard for her right now, so we haven't had a ton of discussion about it, but at least I know that there's somebody out there, that I can reach out to and say, hey, this is going on. And, she'll be like, oh yeah, I have that same thing, or I was wondering about the same thing, or, so at least there's like, I don't know, company in this miserable diagnosis. But so yeah, it's sort of a plus minus sort of thing. Also because of her diagnosis and wanting to help her sort of cope with all of this, I got back on the bandwagon and I started looking at, I found the VEDS movement, which I didn't even know it existed. It's crazy. Cause again, I had just sort of given up on it in 2009 when I couldn't find anything. And, so now I'm just learning that there are so many more opportunities to meet people like me, and so many other resources that weren't there before. So support groups, all that. So
yeah. How has that felt for you?
I haven't started any support groups yet. I'm not going to lie. I've just been, it's almost like I'm going through the diagnosis again. Like, it's almost like like I said, I feel like I'm finally processing it. I have the time to process it. But it's just nice to know that at least it's out there.
Yeah. And it didn't exist before 2019.
No.
So.
Just general EDS groups, which nothing wrong with other EDSers, but VEDS is a little more complicated. And
yeah.
There's a lot of loss.
There is a lot of loss. A lot of loss to deal with. Now, do you have advice for other people who are just diagnosed with this?
Yeah. And been thinking a lot about that, especially just talking with my sister, but just I think making sure that you stick to your guns. Like if, making sure that you're heard, if you're seeing a physician in the ER, in a primary care, in a consult office, whatever it is, just make sure that you stick to your guns and tell them what's going on and make sure you're heard, and don't let them tell you that you're crazy, and don't let them make you feel like you're crazy, and just really push to get what you need. Advocate for yourself.
That's such good advice. And it's hard sometimes because really there can be a lot of shame in feeling like you go to the ER, you try to advocate for yourself, you think you're having an event, and then nothing is there.
Then you don't have it, and then they make you feel like you're dumb for coming in, or you wait a little bit too long and you go in and then they shame you for waiting too long. And I feel like, there's just a lot of heaviness surrounding the decision of whether or not we should go to the ER and seek emergency care, because it's terrifying to walk around and know that any little pain could be it, that could be the one thing, and so you're already terrified. And then to feel like an idiot, or to be made to feel like an idiot, or to made to feel, shamed when you're going to seek that medical care. That just sucks.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a, there's really
no
not
reason for it.
a win. Yeah. There's no reason
for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is really good advice. And it is like, at some point you have to kind of recenter and say like, okay, like it's okay for me to go to the ER and for nothing to happen. Yep. In fact, that's a good thing, right? Like you don't want a life-threatening emergency, but even, just letting go of that shame, because you have no other way to know.
Don't let them make you feel, don't let them make you feel stupid.
Yeah.
It's about you. Yeah. Don't let them make it about them. And by them, I mean the medical system. Like, it's about you. It's about what you need. And,
So let's go back. So you are a PA, or, which is a physician's assistant for anybody who is listening and doesn't know.
I guess it's physician associate now. They're going to change them out. Yeah, but that's another. Yeah.
Oh, I like that better, actually. It makes it sound.
Yeah.
Much
You're
more
not somebody's assistant anymore. So
that's great. So PA stands for physician associate.
To becoming. Yep.
To becoming. Do you have advice for other medical professionals in the field?
Yes. Listen, it's the first thing we're taught in school, is that, the patient's history is the most important part of your entire interaction. The exam, sure, it's important too. And your labs and your diagnostics, it's important, but it's not as important as what the patient is saying. And so you just have to take the time and you have to listen. And while I totally empathize with what medical professionals have to do and what they're asked to do. And, they're asked to see too many patients, quite frankly. And I think, especially by the end of the day or by the end of the shift, they're exhausted, but you still have to listen, and you can't gaslight people. Like, you can't just put people in boxes. You have to listen to that individual story. And part of, being a medical professional is to help people and to make them feel better. And so even if you feel like something is ridiculous, if it, if a scan would make someone feel less anxious and feel better about what's going on, then get the scan.
Yeah.
I know you have to contend with insurance companies and, hospital administration, but at the end of the day, it's about the patient in front of you. So do your best and listen.
Such great advice. I love that advice.
It's hard, but
yeah. Now you saw like a lot of patients because you worked in urgent care, right?
Yeah. So I was a PA. I'm kind of in sort of semi-retirement right now, trying to figure out what's going on. I was a PA for 10 years. The first 8 years I spent working with the underserved, underinsured, uninsured, Hispanic, Spanish-speaking population. And then the last 2-3 years of my career, I spent in urgent care. So I was seeing anywhere from 30 to 70 patients a day in a 12-hour shift.
Now, what made you step away? Like the last dissection?
Yeah. Both times I've had a vascular incident have been during some of the most stressful times of my life. So I think I'm contributing the stress to, obviously, like, I have VEDS, so something's going to happen, maybe no matter what, but I think that stress directly contributed. I really do, because you're stressed, your cortisol and your stress hormones go up. And so then your blood pressure goes up, and then that can lead to a deadly dissection or a rupture. So I have decided to step away for a bit to sort of reevaluate my career and just figure out what's right for me.
Yeah. Are you doing anything fun while you're reevaluating?
Yeah. I went on a 4-week camping trip recently, so that was nice. Through the mountains, through the Northern Rockies and Montana, the Dakotas.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah. I read a lot. I puzzle a lot. What else do I do? I love wine. Don't tell anybody that.
Do you want me to cut that out of the?
No, it doesn't matter. I love wine.
Say it out.
We try to take, little road trips and stuff. That's probably what we do most.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story on the podcast. I really hope that it helps reach people who need to hear it.
Me too. Thanks for allowing it to happen. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. All right, I look forward to meeting you one day in person.
You too.
Thanks everyone for tuning in today, and thank you, Kelly, for sharing your story with us. On the next episode on December 10th, which was the last episode of this season, we will talk to Katie DeCourcy, whose son and husband both have VEDS. Don't forget to subscribe to Staying Connected on your podcast player so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like this show, I hope you will consider sharing it with your friends on social media to help us raise awareness of VEDS together. You can also support the production of this podcast by joining my Patreon at patreon.com/translucent1. Thank you so much, and I will see you soon.